What's that? Why am I doing this review? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because over on my other channel, Seeking Answers, I'm doing a true crime documentary based on the life and crimes of Henry Lee Lucas, who this movie is based upon. Go and check it out and enjoy this double feature.
Sounds like fun.
Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, follows the titular nomadic serial killer played by Michael Rooker, who's released from prison following the murder of his mother. He then travels throughout America murdering any unlucky sod that happens to cross his path, eventually joining forces with his old prison buddy Otis, played by Tom Towles, who was actually called Otis in real life.
Hello, Otis.
But I guess they thought the name was a bit silly, so here it's Otis. I don't know.
Fair enough.
And forming a bond with Otis's sister Becky, played by Tracy Arnold, which also never happened in real life as far as I'm aware.
Well, he's mistaken.
The movie's inception began in 1984 when director John McNaughton was hired by the MPI Media Group to direct a documentary about Chicago gangsters in the 1930s. This eventually became the film Dealers in Death, which was well received critically and a decent financial success. So the company gave McNaughton $110,000 to direct another documentary, this time about the Chicago wrestling scene in the 1950s. As long as you steer clear of Jimmy Snooker and Pat Patterson, I'm sure you'll be fine.
Hang on, neither of them were from Chicago.
Well, I know, but the joke still works. They're both criminals.
Oh, come on, you do this every single
Look,
time.
I'm really getting tired of you bumping into these reviews, constantly trying to interfere. Right, the joke works, people got it, just avoid them. That was the joke. When are you going to send me back to present day?
Gotta go.
Hey, get back here.
Fuck him.
However, due to funding issues, this project collapsed, so McNaughton instead decided to use the budget he had been given to direct a feature film instead. He had always been interested in making a horror movie, but considered the budget too small to make a film about aliens or monsters. He was unsure of how to proceed until he saw an episode of 2020 about Henry Lee Lucas, at which point he realised he had his chosen subject matter. Michael Rooker, who was actually working as a janitor at the time, auditioned for and quickly won the part of Henry, and filming began in 1985, lasting 28 days. However, because the film's budget was so low, several creative compromises had to be made when it came to casting, props and costumes. Many of the bit parts were played by members of the crew or friends of the director. Henry's car wasn't bought for the movie and actually belonged to one of the film's electricians, and even the character's clothes were provided by Rooker himself. In fact, the production was so low on cash that they couldn't even afford any extras. Any background players seen throughout the movie were all genuinely random pedestrians going about their business. For example, in the scene when Becky emerges from the subway, a pair of men can be seen having a heated discussion at the top of the steps, who really were just two random strangers arguing. They refused to move, so the director just kept them in the shot anyway.
That'd be a mistake.
In addition, Michael Rooker remained in character throughout the entire shoot, even when off set. He didn't socialise with any of the cast or crew during filming, and even kept a private dressing room away from everyone else. According to costume designer Patricia Hart, she and Rooker would drive to set together each day, and every time she never knew from one minute to another if she was talking to Michael or to Henry. It got to the point that when Rooker's wife discovered she was pregnant during the shoot, she waited until after filming had wrapped before telling him the news. Guys, there's a fine line between method acting and pure schizophrenia.
You know what I mean.
Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer premiered at the Chicago International Film Festival on September the 24th, 1986, but amazingly didn't actually get a wide theatrical release until 4 years later. This was due to a number of reasons, most prominently the fact that the producers had started to lose faith in the movie. They had expected it to be another straightforward slasher film, and felt that the darker, more complex movie that McNaughton had made would not bring in a large teenage audience, causing them to shelve the project for a number of years. The movie also had trouble finding a distributor, as many who considered buying the rights quickly got turned off by the graphic content and subject matter. Was the title, A Portrait of a Serial Killer, somehow misleading to you?
What do you mean?
However, after a few more showings at several festivals, the movie started to gain notoriety among critics and moviegoers, and was eventually bought by Grey Cat Films, but there were still problems. The MPAA gave the movie an X rating, and no amount of editing or complaining from John McNaughton could convince them to lower it to an R. In the end, he gave in to the MPAA's demands and released the film as it was. In fact, this was one of 3 movies that encouraged the MPAA to create the NC-17 rating for non-pornographic films with extremely graphic content, along with Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down and The Cook, The Thief, His Wife and Her Lover. Try saying that 5 times fast. The cook, the thief, his wife and a lover. The cook, the thief, his wife and a lover. The cook... Oh, who gives a fuck?
Serves you right.
Eventually, the movie was released worldwide on January the 5th, 1990, grossing $609,000 at the box office. But reviews were mixed, particularly regarding the film's violence and its controversial themes. However, many positive reviews praised the movie for its more thoughtful and realistic exploration of serial killers, as opposed to the oversaturated slasher genre of the 1980s. And it eventually garnered a cult following and 5 nominations at the Independent Spirit Awards, but unfortunately didn't win any. The director did admit that he didn't want to make a direct biopic of Lucas's life. He claimed that it's not supposed to be an accurate depiction of him and his crimes, but more of a mix between reality and fiction. He just wanted to tell the story of a deranged serial killer and what they're really like. But that makes no sense. I mean, this isn't something like Elephant where it's loosely based on real people, but they're different characters with different names. This is literally based on the story of Henry Lee Lucas and uses most of the same names. Yet they get it wrong where he and Otis Toole met.
What was he in for?
No, they met in a soup kitchen in Jacksonville, Florida. The movie actually has Lucas murdering Toole, which never happened. He actually later died of natural causes in prison. They get the murder of Lucas's mother wrong.
She hit me with a whiskey bottle.
She hit him with a broom, not a whiskey bottle. He also claims that he stabbed her, but in real life he actually claimed that he shot and beat her to death. Though Lucas would constantly change his story, so maybe I'll let this one slide. But he did kill his mother in his teen years, they were both sexually assaulted by relatives as children, and they did both provide several false confessions. In the movie, Henry goes into a violent rage whenever he is exposed to sexuality of any kind, often attacking and berating Otis whenever he appears to molest or rape anyone. But in reality, he was a serial child molester and rapist himself. Interestingly, police officers are never visible on screen during the film. This was purposely done to create a sense of world without law and order, and to remove the comforting buffer zone that seeing a policeman would give an audience. I will say the film has a very strong opening. It just starts by showing their victims accompanied with some really eerie music and graphic visuals. And there's very little dialogue, it's just him going around stalking people for a while, but it does manage to still maintain your interest.
Hey, are you going to the city?
Sure, hop in.
Ah, the 80s, where it was still perfectly acceptable to just randomly get into a complete stranger's car for a lift home.
Where'd you get that? Picked it up.
From... You know, this isn't even relevant or important, but I've never understood the concept of playing catch. I mean, they're not even talking to each other. You're just chucking a ball back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. How is that fun? How are you not bored out of your minds? Weirdly, despite it being Henry's story, we do spend a great deal learning about Otis's sister instead.
Then he started coming to my room a lot after that. And I didn't fight him, because when I did, he just hit me.
But it does transition into learning about his not long after. There is a really weird scene where Otis kicks the TV in, but I have to admit, I love Henry's reaction.
What did you do that for?
And then we spend a great deal of time watching the two serial killers buy a goddamn TV! But it's worth it for the sarcastic sales assistant.
It's a videotape recorder and camera rolled into one. You just pop in a cassette and you're ready to go.
You can make your own movies with that?
What else would you do with it?
How much you want for it?
It's worth $1,000. I'd take half.
$500?
Yeah, half of $1,000 is $500.
And his death is pretty sweet, although I'm pretty sure that also didn't happen in real life. We do get a decent moment as they watch over home videos, and it's a nice sequence to show just how normal murderers can act, pretending to have seemingly completely regular lives. And it's so creepy as they head out to find a murder with some really unnerving music. But I will say, some of the acting is really bad, accompanied with some really cheesy editing.
You guys need any help? Otis, do you need some help, or can you do it yourself?
Adios, motherfucker.
And what's with the composer here? It is messed up as they watch their own snuff films. There are so many disturbing moments. The movie is alright, there's just not a lot to it. I mean, if you don't know anything about either killer, you don't really learn a lot about them either. And if you do know a lot about them, you'll just be bothered by all of the factual inaccuracies. But I do really like the ending. Henry takes Becky's bloody suitcase to the edge of a road and ditches it, implying that he's also axed her off. It's a really fucking creepy ending to, in my view, a very mediocre film. And honestly, I don't particularly see why it's in the 1001. I don't really feel like the movie has anything that interesting to say about serial killers beyond showing them living normal lives. There isn't anything here that wasn't done better in the likes of Silence of the Lambs or Seven or Natural Born Killers. It's not bad, but it's not all that great either.